The Hermit Kingdom, North Korea's dynasty of control. The blood-soaked birth of a dynasty. In the winter of 1950, as United Nations forces pressed northward through the Korean peninsula, a 38-year-old guerrilla fighter named Kim Il-sung made a chilling calculation. Surrounded by the chaos of war, he understood that survival meant more than just defeating enemies on the battlefield. It required the systematic elimination of anyone who might challenge his vision of absolute power. What emerged from this crucible of violence wasn't just another communist state, but perhaps the most perfectly totalitarian society in human history. The story of North Korea's dictatorship begins not with ideology, but with blood. Kim Il-sung, handpicked by Soviet authorities despite his relatively minor role in anti-Japanese resistance, possessed an almost supernatural understanding of power's mechanics. Unlike other communist leaders who relied on party apparatus or military might, Kim grasped that true control required something far more insidious: the complete rewiring of human consciousness itself. The architecture of mental slavery. By 1953, as the Korean War's guns fell silent, Kim Il-sung had already begun constructing what historians now recognize as the world's most sophisticated mind control apparatus. The Juche ideology, ostensibly about self-reliance, was actually a masterpiece of psychological manipulation that transformed an entire population into willing slaves. Every aspect of daily life became a ritual of submission. Citizens bowed to portraits, recited loyalty oaths, and reported on neighbors with religious fervor. The genius of Kim's system wasn't its brutality, though that was certainly present, but its completeness. Unlike Stalin's Soviet Union or Mao's China, where pockets of independent thought persisted, North Korea achieved something historians previously thought impossible: the total elimination of dissent, not through force alone, but through the systematic destruction of the very concept of alternatives. Consider the fate of Pak Hon-yong, once the most powerful communist leader in southern Korea. When he challenged Kim's authority in the early 1950s, he didn't simply disappear. His entire extended family, his associates, even people who had once worked in the same building, vanished into the growing network of political prison camps. The message was clear. Opposition to Kim wasn't just treason, it was a contagious disease that required quarantine. The laboratory of human control. What makes North Korea's dictatorship historically unprecedented isn't just its longevity, but its function as a massive social experiment in human malleability. Kim Il-sung and his successors created what anthropologists call a total institution, a closed system where every human interaction serves the state's psychological objectives. The Songbun system, implemented in the 1960s, divided the entire population into 51 subcategories based on their family's relationship to the regime. This wasn't merely a class system, it was a biological hierarchy that determined everything from food rations to marriage prospects. Children learned their place in this cosmic order before they could read, creating a society where inequality felt as natural as breathing. But perhaps the most chilling aspect of North Korean control was its exploitation of humanity's deepest needs. The regime didn't just demand obedience, it positioned itself as the sole source of love, meaning, and belonging. Citizens weren't just subjects, they were children in an abusive family system, dependent on their tormentors for emotional survival. The succession crisis that never came. When Kim Il-sung died in 1994, Western analysts predicted the regime's collapse within months. They fundamentally misunderstood what they were observing. This wasn't a typical dictatorship held together by fear and coercion. It was a hermetically sealed universe with its own logic, laws, and emotional gravity. Kim Jong-il's succession revealed the true sophistication of his father's creation. Rather than seizing power through military coup or party maneuvering, he inherited it like a medieval monarch, complete with divine legitimacy. The population didn't just accept this transition, They mourned Kim Il-sung's death with genuine hysteria, their grief indistinguishable from that of bereaved children. Under Kim Jong-il, the system evolved from crude totalitarianism into something more subtle and terrifying. The 1990s famine, which killed between 600,000 and 1 million people, became an opportunity to refine control mechanisms. Survivors weren't angry at the regime that had failed them. They were grateful to the dear leader who had saved them from starvation. This psychological alchemy, transforming suffering into loyalty, represents perhaps the greatest achievement in the history of political manipulation. The digital age paradox. Kim Jong-un's rise in 2011 presented the regime with its greatest challenge yet: maintaining absolute control in an interconnected world. The young dictator, educated partly in Switzerland, understood that North Korea's isolation was both its greatest strength and its fatal vulnerability. His response has been masterful in its contradictions. While developing nuclear weapons and intercontinental ballistic missiles, the ultimate guarantees of regime survival, Kim Jong-un has also engaged in unprecedented diplomatic theater, but brilliant demonstrations of the regime's confidence in its own permanence. As the world watched Kim Jong-un joke and smile on international television, his half-brother's assassins had just murdered Kim Jong-nam in a Malaysian airport using VX nerve agent. The message was unmistakable. Charm and brutality were not contradictions in the North Korean system. They were complementary tools of control. The persistence of the unthinkable. Today, as Kim Jong-un enters his second decade in power, North Korea represents something unprecedented in human history: a successful multi-generational totalitarian dynasty. 3 generations of Kims have ruled over 75 years, creating the world's longest-running dictatorship. More remarkably, they've done so while maintaining genuine popular support among much of their population. Recent defector testimonies reveal the continuing evolution of control mechanisms. Smartphone technology, which might have liberated information, has instead become a tool for surveillance. Social media concepts have been adapted to strengthen community monitoring. Even North Korea's apparent economic reforms serve primarily to create new dependencies on state approval. The regime's nuclear program, far from being a desperate gambit, represents the logical culmination of the Kim dynasty's strategic thinking. Nuclear weapons don't just deter foreign invasion. They provide the ultimate insurance policy for a system built on the premise that alternatives to Kim family rule are literally unthinkable. The mirror of modern tyranny. As historians, we study North Korea not just as an isolated curiosity, but as a warning about human nature's darkest possibilities. The Kim regime has achieved what every dictator dreams of: the complete subordination of individual consciousness to state power. They've proven that with sufficient control over information, education, and social relationships, humans can be conditioned to love their chains. In our current age of information warfare, social media manipulation, and authoritarian resurgence worldwide, North Korea serves as both cautionary tale and disturbing preview. The techniques pioneered in Pyongyang, the systematic exploitation of tribal loyalty, the weaponization of uncertainty, the transformation of suffering into gratitude, echo in political movements across the globe. The Kim dynasty's greatest achievement isn't its survival against impossible odds, but its demonstration that totalitarian control remains possible in the modern world. As we watch contemporary democracies struggle with polarization and authoritarianism, the Hermit Kingdom stands as a reminder that the human capacity for freedom is neither inevitable nor indestructible. In the end, North Korea's dictatorship endures not despite human nature, but because of it. The Kims understood something that their victims never could: that the desire to belong, to believe, and to submit to something greater than oneself can be more powerful than any hunger for freedom. Their legacy challenges us to confront an uncomfortable truth: that perhaps the greatest threat to human liberty isn't external oppression, but our own willingness to surrender autonomy for the comforting illusion of certainty. The Hermit Kingdom remains sealed, its people trapped not just by barbed wire and guard towers, but by the invisible chains of conditioned consciousness. And in that terrible success lies a lesson that every free society ignores at its peril.